This is SportsJam. I'm Doug Doyle. My guest today has given us an emotional, enlightening, educational, and entertainment pathway back into history and provided a mirror and a window for us to understand stories of why we are created equal. Since his Academy Award nominated Brooklyn Bridge in 1981, Ken Burns has reached historical status as the director and producer of some of the most acclaimed documentaries ever made, among them the Civil War, baseball, and of course, jazz. What an honor to finally meet the award-winning filmmaker who has succeeded in his goal of touching something distinctly American with each of his amazing projects. Ken Burns, welcome to Sports Jam.
Thank you, Doug. I'm so delighted to be with you.
You know, your latest masterpiece that I just watched this week premieres on PBS in September. It's a four-part series that took you 6 years to put together, Muhammad Ali, filled with incredible footage, photos, and guests. First of all, congratulations on such an amazing project.
Oh, that's very kind of you, and I have to share the credit. It does make me look good, but the co-directors are Sarah Burns, my daughter, and her husband, David McMahon, whom we've been collaborating with for an awfully long time. And they are also the writers of this. So huge credit goes to them and our extraordinary team of editors and footage finders to get the stuff. I mean, there's lots of documentaries on Muhammad Ali. None have been from birth to death in quite as detail, but I think we also have been able to offer not just the experts and the pundits, but also the family members who've been calling us crying, saying, I've never seen that picture of my dad, or I've never seen that picture of my husband, or that piece of footage. So we're sort of thrilled by the early response.
Absolutely, and I will touch upon you working with your daughter and your son-in-law a little bit later. Ken, you mentioned in an interview with Bob Costas, I think nearly 30 years ago, that you show frailty in your subjects provide a sympathetic view at times with a storytelling style that prompts emotion. That certainly is the case with Muhammad Ali. What touched you the most about this project once it's been completed?
Well, I think I realize, having looked back on 40 plus years of making films, and many of them biographies, and certainly biographies being the constituent building blocks of the big series like the Civil War and baseball and jazz, just how important a figure he is, how mythic he is. Walt Whitman describes this kind of idea of an uber American, the someone who contradicts himself. And Muhammad Ali is a great teacher, a great mythic figure in our culture. He's obviously the greatest athlete of the 20th century. I don't think you could have any argument about that, and I'm willing to have that kind of discussion and respect some people who say, no, it's somebody else. I don't know who that somebody else is. But he's also somebody who intersects with all the major questions of the last half of the 20th century, and lo and behold, as we lift our heads up after those 6 years of working, he is a figure speaking to us directly about what's going on now in every way, shape, and form. If it's race, if it's sports, if it's politics, if it's religion, if it's Me Too, if it's Black Lives Matter, he's there. And he's doing it with a heart that evolved, that is so capacious that you realize that there are very few people who die the most beloved, if anyone, the most beloved person on the planet. And that's what happened to him. I just finished a biography on Ernest Hemingway that didn't end too well. Now, it didn't end too well for Muhammad Ali in that he was imprisoned in an ironic way by this Parkinson's disease that slowed and silenced and gave him that familiar tremor that we remember from 25 years ago at the Atlanta Olympics. But in his journey, it is the hero's journey. It's the mythic journey of the hero. And so his flaws are magnified the way the Greek gods had strengths and weaknesses that were magnified for them, but for us. And so we see in him aspects of ourselves. When he says, I am the greatest, that pulls so many other people into that possibility of saying, you know what? Despite the bad hand that I've been dealt, I can do something. And I find him, of all the biographies I've done, the most compelling, and someone that my heart goes out to the most. I mean, this is awkward to say, I love him.
We certainly can see why. And in this 8-hour, 4-part series. It is so timely right now. You just have this knack of, bringing things, you plan them in advance, but boy, when you pick the time to air them, you and PBS, it couldn't come at a better
Well,
time.
can I tell you, Doug, it's so interesting, and I swear to God, we never think about drawing links, pointing neon signs to, oh, isn't this so much like Me Too, or isn't this so much like about that? Mark Twain is supposed to have said, history doesn't repeat itself, which of course it doesn't. We like to use that. History doesn't repeat itself, he said, but it rhymes. And I have never finished a project when you haven't looked up from having the struggle, the multi-year struggle of trying to tell a good story, and it's never easy, ever, ever easy, whether it's Vietnam War or Civil War or jazz or baseball or this. And you realize, oh my God, it's speaking to, and they all are like that. But none sort of contains the contradictions, the controversy, the undertow, the majesty that the story of Muhammad Ali does. If you're looking for a Valentine to him, you're not going to find it. This guy is a womanizer. This guy treats his opponents, and particularly his main rival, Joe Frazier, using the Jim Crow language of the South in which he was raised. He knows better than that. And yet at the same time, you have this magnificent athlete who pays the ultimate price for entertaining us and also brings us a message of courage, refusing induction into the draft based on religious beliefs. He scares us, he thrills us, he frustrates us, he ennobles us, and it isn't just Americans. He's a world figure, and that's why I've called him mythic. I just think he's so much larger than life, and then therefore he becomes a great teacher for the rest of us.
The name itself, Muhammad Ali, what struck me in watching this 4-part series is how many years it took for newspapers, mainstream media, broadcasters, even his opponents in the ring, to stop calling him
Cassius Clay.
Cassius Clay. They kept referring to him as Cassius and not recognizing him as Muhammad Ali. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think for the African American experience in the United States, which is a 402-year-old struggle, right? I mean, this isn't George Floyd and Rodney King and Emmett Till, stuff that's happened in the last 70 years. This has been going on for 402 years. And so it's really a struggle for recognition, to be heard. And so here you have a man who makes a decision on his own to join a religious sect that, is imperfect and in many ways very dangerous. But he's done that, and he's changed his name. He's been given a new name by the head of that sect, Elijah Muhammad, and nobody wants to follow it. And in some ways, the whole second episode of our series is called "What's My Name?" The first is the greatest. That's obvious. There's this kid from Louisville who, he's barely put on a pair of boxing gloves, and he's already declared himself the greatest. And the chutzpah and the nerve and the energy and the wonderfulness of it, the improbability of it is great. But the second one is, please, this is who I am. Why can't you do this? And whether it's an Illinois State Athletic Commission or it's an opponent, they're razzing, and he's asking to be heard. And that's it. All of us are asking to be heard. And it's particularly difficult in the African American community because they have had the peculiar experience of being unfree in a supposedly free land. And that's what makes it so interesting that the African American contribution is so great in the history of the United States, disproportionate to the percentage of their population, because, nobody has to, the genius of America is improvisation, right? Living free life. Nobody has to improvise more than somebody who is actually not free in a free land. And so all of my work begins to touch on that, because if you're interested in America, it's all intertwined. And I think Ali is a fascinating way in which, in the middle of the civil rights movement, which is about integration, he's about separation. Right? But yet he is the most integrated and accepting of people. And, he's a loving man and father, and yet he's unfaithful to his wives. He's, perfect specimen of an athlete who, descends to sort of really harmful language about particularly Joe Frazier, but other people, Terrell. He was always belittling his opponent. Even Foreman, it's just
Great footage of him saying to, Terrell, in the ring, what's my name?
What's my name? What's my name? And this is hugely important. And you begin to understand that this is a whole man trying to express. And does he make mistakes? Yes, we all do. And does he have flaws? Yes, we all do. And can you cancel him? I suppose so. But there's too much that we would lose of the athletic beauty and grace, of the sacrifice of that life, of the principle that he stood up for with his religious beliefs, for the message of love that he eventually brought to the entire world. I can't dispose of people, and I don't think we can, because then nobody survives. Nobody survives. Nobody's perfect.
We learn so much in Ken Burns documentaries and in Muhammad Ali. When he is first training with Archie Moore, it didn't last long before he went to Angelo Dundee. I started liking his training methods to Mr. Miyagi and the Karate Kid.
Exactly.
Right.
There's something so impossible. We have the great boxer, heavyweight champion Michael Bent, who's kind of the guy who, when we start fights, he's our inside man, telling us what's going on. He's taking apart. He's a wonderful guide for all of us, particularly those of us who aren't really drawn to boxing, except when it's somebody extraordinary. I don't know how it is. I don't really like boxing, but I made 2 films about boxing, one on Jack Johnson, the first African-American heavyweight, and now on Muhammad Ali with Sarah and Dave. But Michael's there to do it, and everything that he's doing is wrong. Like, you don't lean back, right, to miss a point. You duck, right? And he's not doing any of that, and he's dancing, and he's doing the rope-a-dope at different times, and he's always adjusting and stuff. And so there's a kind of exquisite beauty to watching his intelligence. This is a brutal sport, a physically brutal sport that he brought this heart and this mind to. Now, obviously, other boxers have to bring their heart. You have to want to beat your opponent. You have to want it really bad. And you can actually see, as Bent helps us understand, and our eyes show us that in the first Frazier fight, Frazier wanted it more. And it's very clear. But you see in Ali this exquisite way of trying to understand the dimensions of it. And I think no more so than in the Terrell fight, when he's sick of people saying you're Cassius Clay. And so he's just saying, he's punching him. He's really one of the great fights. He's just dominating the whole thing. And he's just saying, what's my name? What's my name? And he's just asking to be respected as a man. And in the very beginning of our film, in the intro, he has this passionate statement that he makes from Deer Lake about how, saying, I'm the guy who I'm the black guy who got up in your white television, in your white satellites, in your white this, and your white that, and I still stayed true to my people and who I was. I got rich, and I didn't leave anybody behind. And that's a huge part of who he is. So when he's exonerated by the Supreme Court and has every reason to rejoice, he's saying, no, people are having a tough time. Stuff is happening to the Rodney Kings of that day. People are losing their jobs. Justice isn't there. Yes, this was a momentary victory for me, but let's just remember that the struggle is much bigger than that. And that's true for everyone on the planet. That we can always bend toward a more perfect union, as our Constitution puts it in the preamble.
You had to struggle when you were 11 years old when you lost your mom, and you became a voracious reader. And obviously, you have passed along your skills to your daughter, Sarah. But who taught you the importance of reading? You're always bringing up poets and great quotes. Where did that start for you?
Doug, I've been so fortunate. I've had so many mentors and teachers, beginning with my father and my mother. My mother was sick for almost a decade. That is an incredible teacher. She was incredibly brave and lived far longer than even her doctors predicted, but it was a devastating childhood for my younger brother, Rick, and me. And my father didn't do too well with it afterwards either. But I got my love of film from him, who who cried once at a movie he let me stay up and watch. I had a teacher who reminded me that there is as much drama in what is and what was than anything that the human imagination. So this idea of being a filmmaker didn't necessarily have to be Alfred Hitchcock or John Ford. I could be, or Steven Spielberg. I could be documentary. And I had always had this love of history, of just reading, and untrained. I didn't take history courses except when they made you take it. And the last course I took in history in college was Russian history. So go figure. But each of the films, particularly the early ones, have had mentors who reminded me. And so the references to poetry, to literature abound. And I think it's true if in any life that's curious. You wonder why it is. You know, Wynton Marsalis said something to me, my goodness, it must have been in like 95. So we're coming up on 30 years ago, where he said in jazz, in the interview, he says, sometimes a thing and the opposite of a thing are true at the same time. It was just like, it knocked me over. And it's true, you know, and we live in this media world of ones and zeros where everything is going to be on or off, black or white, yes or no, good or bad, rich or poor, gay or straight. And it's never like that. It's always some continuum in which there is undertow. We're human beings, and our frailties, you know, to use a word that you said, are manifest. And the thing is, you got to be able to take them all in. You got to be able to look at the strengths and the weaknesses and feel. You don't have to cancel somebody. You don't have to say good or bad. You just hold in tension these things and say, in a way, imply, isn't that an awful lot like us? You know, if you're a baseball fan and you're worried about Barry Bonds, you need to have what Tom Boswell, the retiring writer for the Washington Post, said that Shakespeare had, which was negative capability. The poet John Keats said that Shakespeare had negative capability, just kept everything in tension. So, you know, the moralist in us, Tom said, wants to decide good or bad. But how can you do that? Because you'd lose the people that are closest to you and yourself. We all have these things. That's why the sports is so wonderful, because it's a seemingly abstract way to get at really fundamental human questions, right? And I get drawn back to it, whether it's baseball or boxing or other things, because it's such an extraordinary teacher. And no teacher is a greater teacher than, you know, I would say Abraham Lincoln, Muhammad Ali, Louis Armstrong in jazz. These are among the world's greatest teachers, and how fortunate that we Americans, they're all American in the realest sense.
Two quick questions before we talk about this event you have coming up on Monday. Do you have even more appreciation for jazz? You use it in this documentary than you did when you actually did jazz.
Yeah, you know, I'm a child of R&B and rock and roll, and that's who I am, right? And I love all that stuff. But suddenly I was introduced, mostly by Wynton and by my longtime writer and collaborator, Jeffrey Ward, to this, you know, American art form that's recognized around the world. And it rearranged all my molecules. And that's, you know, I listen to it all the time. And it gives me, it's sustaining in a way. It has a kind of dimension and a nourishment that I love. So, yeah. I listened to it, but you know, I made a big series on country music too, and there's a kind of, and Wynton was in it, and he was reminding us of this elemental stuff, just really basic human stuff, like, you know, the joy of birth, he said, the sadness at death, you know, finding God, getting right with God, feeling the loss of someone that you love. You know, all of these things are just part of the simple, seemingly simple country song, which are the elemental facts of our lives. And so jazz gets it in one way, country gets it in another. And then the other arenas, politics, you know, American history, wars, and sports like baseball and boxing cover it.
Real quickly before we talk about Monday's event, you're driving in a car and you can go back in time, and you have Jackie Robinson, Louis Armstrong, Abraham Lincoln, and Muhammad Ali in the car with you. Where are you taking them? And what's the first topic of conversation?
You know, I pull over to the side of the road, Doug, and I turn around because I want to look at these men. And I'm sorry that they're all men because they're great. But Elizabeth Cady Stanton should be in that. She's phenomenal. Harriet Tubman should be there. Ida B. Wells should be in that conversation. These are all remarkable people.
Just a
Franklin
bus,
Roosevelt.
then. Maybe you'll take a bus
Maybe
then.
maybe it's the bus, the Bluebird bus that Muhammad Ali had, and just turn around and talk about two things. Talk about the U.S. and talk about us. Because all of my life, I have made films about the U.S., capital U, capital S. But I've also made films about the lowercase plural pronoun, us. All of the intimacy of that, and all of the majesty, the contradiction, the controversy of the U.S. And I just want to know, all of them in their own way got us and got the U.S., sometimes at odds with it, sometimes in defiance, sometimes in a kind of poetic dimension, but they all saw something that I keep trying to get, and in my feeble way, I'll never get to. I've made the same film over and over again, Doug. Who are we? You know, who are we? And these people can tell me a little bit more about who we are. That's what I want to know.
And
I
we
don't
love
need to
it.
go anywhere. Maybe you take them to the Brooklyn Bridge. Maybe you take them to the Grand Canyon. But they are the Brooklyn Bridge. They are the Grand Canyons of our human architecture. And and all of them I love in very, very special ways.
What a great answer. This Monday marks the 25th anniversary of Muhammad Ali's Olympic torch lighting, and that's the genesis of some hour-long discussions that you're having with some special guests. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we have been partnering, we, PBS, have been partnering in advance of the broadcast to do a series of conversations. We partnered with The Undefeated, the ESPN magazine, and we have on Monday the 19th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time a wonderful conversation with Janet Evans, the Olympic swimmer, who surprised us all by not lighting the torch, but by handing it off to a very shaky Parkinson's, possessed man named Muhammad Ali. Todd Boyd, who's a professor of cinema studies, who's in our Ali film and is, I've known for years, just wonderful. And the senior writer for The Undefeated, Lene O'Neill. And if you have any questions, you can go to pbs.org/Ali events and sign up, register, join us. It's going to be a really, really great conversation. This topic on Monday night, coinciding exactly with the 25th anniversary of him lighting the torch in Atlanta, is about Ali on the world stage. And so we think about the way that aspects of joining a Muslim faith, in which, there's a significant minority in the United States, but in many parts of the world, Saharan and sub-Saharan Africa, dominant, Middle East dominant, Southeast Asia dominant. So you've got one of the world's big, great religions, which we Americans almost purposefully and intentionally distort and certainly don't try to understand. And he becomes the person who does that. He also puts Africa on the map by fighting George Foreman in Kinshasa, Zaire, in the rumble in the jungle. And all of a sudden, the identification, not just with Muslims and with African Americans, but with Africans around the world becomes significant. So understanding how he moves from this kid who has these crazy sets of skills, boxing in Louisville, Kentucky, to being the most beloved man on our planet, that is a journey I will take and retake with these extraordinary people, Janet and Todd and Lene, and hopefully I can add a couple of things to it. But please join us. It should be a really wonderful event. And I guess it'll be archived and you can check it. But Monday night at 7 Eastern, and just go to pbs.org/Ali events and sign up and be with us. We'd love to have you.
And then after that, of course, Muhammad Ali premieres the documentary, the 4-part series, in late September, September 19th through the 22nd on PBS. Check your local listings. I'm going to take your word, exquisite ending, Ken, to this amazing piece of work. So emotional and really brought out home what Muhammad Ali means to so many people. Ken Burns has been our guest here on Sports Jam. It's been a thrill. Congratulations on another huge success.
Thank you. You're very kind, Doug. It's great to be with you. Thanks so much. I hope you enjoy the show. And it'll be available for streaming too. The 19th of September comes around.
We look forward to it. Thanks again.